What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I didn't get a chance yesterday to make my day 3 of training camp video. So I am going to combine days 3 and 4, which is yesterday and today. It's also, day 2 and 3 of actual on-field practice and so on and so forth. So to start with, it doesn't look like it does not appear as if there was really media there today, because there's really not much coming out from today. But there was a bit more from yesterday. But to start with, let me just, kind of reiterate my approach to practices in general, and especially during training camp, during the infancy stages of the season, right? For me, all the stuff that happens in training camp, all the news and, highlights and blah, 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 the good, the bad, all that to me is contextual information that I just take and I store in a data bank for when this preseason starts, and when I actually personally have a chance to put my eyes on the team to verify all of these things, right? So, yesterday it seemed like they had a good practice. There were a few touchdowns, including some long ones. Personally, I'm glad to see that Tua's actually healthy. That's a big thing for me for this season. Hopefully, he doesn't end up getting traded in a package to the Texans like I think he's gonna. So hopefully he remains the starter, because I do want to see what he can do when he's actually healthy and clearly healthy. There's that. And, Albert Wilson showing it up. I've been a fan of his since, he was buried on the depth chart in KC, and since Adam Gase, brought him over as a free agent. So there's good stuff, but I take a very indifferent approach to everything that happens in camp, the good, the bad, whatever. So, the big plays and touchdowns, or, the interceptions or fumbles, or, any of that stuff, right? So, because none of it really actually matters, right? They're not actually playing games. There's no win-loss record right now. It's just practice. The season hasn't even started. So when it comes to the live bullets and how the season's going to turn out, it doesn't really matter, right? So that's why for me, all it really is just contextual data that I will be able to verify later when I actually put my eyes on the team. Okay, so having said that, though, like I said, yesterday seemed to be a pretty good day overall. It seemed like both sides of the ball had, their moments, but there were no, interceptions from what I recall, right? It was pretty much all just, good. And it was a good day of practice. And we like to see that. Like I said, for me, Tua being healthy is one of the biggest things that I'm taking away from practice and want to see going forward, and how he can perform when he's healthy and so on and so forth. So anyway, for me, though, the biggest thing in training camp right now, particularly, and something to keep an eye on, and actually the thing that I'm worried the most about, is the injuries to this point. Because we've just started training camp, and you already have, quite a few players, a handful of players who are injured, including several wide receivers, and, there were a couple players on the offensive line. Now, to be fair, one of the offensive linemen wasn't actually injured. He was just put on the reserve COVID list. The other offensive lineman has been put on IR, though. So there is a balance there, I suppose. Whereas the other players were either just put on PUP list, or, had to go off to the sideline or into the building or something like that, right? So, but anyway, so that's actually, one of the biggest things for me. And then obviously this whole Xavier Howard situation. So actually, before I get to the injuries or whatever, let me actually talk about the Xavier Howard situation, because yesterday in training camp, Xavier Howard came up with an ankle injury. The reason why I'm putting it in air quotes is because I don't actually think he's really injured. Now, I one of the things that I was doing with my time yesterday is I watched Reason's, live show. I really love his show. It's I gotta say, like I said, I got love and respect for all of the Dolphins YouTubers. Just because look, I know people get super offended, but I don't mean anything like personal about it necessarily when I'm saying people have clownish takes. That's not me saying that I think you're a bad person and you should rot in hell. I just think that sometimes people have clownish takes. So, but that doesn't mean that I don't have, love and respect for these guys, because I do. TD, I think he's super over the top. And I think he's a huge homer. But he's a good guy, and he wants the team to win. And, he caters to a portion of the fan base, right? And obviously the fan base is very diverse, clearly. So, I think it is important to have voices that, range across the spectrum. So he caters to a certain, and like I said, at the end of the day, we're all Dolphins fans and we all want to win. So I've got love and respect for him, even though for me personally, he's a bit over the top and definitely a big homer. Doug, on the other hand, I feel like he's a really good guy and everything. Again, huge Dolphins fan, wants, the team to win, caters to a certain portion of the fan base. But he's a small homer, right? TD's got his big homer hat. Doug's got a little teeny one that just sits right on top of his head, because he's definitely a lot more unbiased than someone like a TD. Or as a matter of fact, he had a Big O on his he did a interview with Big O. I gotta say, bro, that was the first. Admittedly, that was the first time I ever really sat down and listened to Big O. But I've heard things from him in the past. That dude is a giant homer, bigger than TD homer, but on that big homer level. That dude is such a fucking homer, bro. It's crazy, and he's super blinded by it. But anyway, that's not really the point. I'm kind of getting off on a tangent. Point is I like these guys, but Reason's show is definitely my favorite because he keeps it the absolute realist. He talks about absolutely everything. He talks about the good, right? He likes Tua. He thinks Tua's going to have a good season and the Dolphins are going to be successful, right? Now, as I've said before, I'm not worried about Tua, but it's not all on Tua, right? Tua could have a good season, and Deshaun Watson for the Texans last year is an example. He had an outstanding season for a quarterback, an elite season for a quarterback. However, his team was shit, which of course goes to the point that it's not all the quarterback, and you have to have a team around you your team around you do their part too. And I'm not convinced about this offensive line. As much talent as there may be in the wide receiver room, I'm concerned about their injuries, and several of them already have injuries, just starting training camp, which doesn't bode well for the season. Right, so and then you add in the running back room and the steps Tua does have to take as well, all of that, right? So I'm not convinced, and I am convinced that they're going to be losing Xavier Howard, and they're not going to be able to replace him. That defense is going to take a major step backwards, and they're not going to be top 10, right? As Reason says all the time on his show, right? Anyway, so that's why I like Reason's show. So part of it, part of my time yesterday was watching that, and then, participating in the open portion. And, so look, and I said a lot of these things, on his show during that time. The thing that I'm focused on, so with Xavier Howard, right? Because that's where I was going. With Xavier Howard, let me start there. So with Xavier Howard, I'm not surprised that he has an injury. And on Reason's show, he had gotten, because he's got connections and stuff, and whatever to reporters, and he's actually got connections. I ain't got shit for connections. I wish I did, but I don't. But he got an email apparently the night before saying that somebody was telling him that Xavier Howard is going to come up with an ankle injury in the near future. In other words, and what's happening is he's doing the Jalen Ramsey, right? He's taking the Jalen Ramsey approach. And I don't blame him, right? Because you don't actually want to get hurt, right? Because that would diminish your trade value. That would be bad news for you. So he's faking an injury because then that way he's able to stay at practice. He's able to go to the facility so he doesn't get fined. He's at practice, but he's not practicing because he has an injury, right? And so he can't be fined, but it prevents him from attending practice and actually going through practice so he doesn't really get hurt and diminish his trade value, etc. Right? So now he's just good. Now and so it is, if you're being honest, it is a form of, or version of holding out, right? He's just doing it in the, the smart way for him, so that way he doesn't lose out on that money. Unfortunately, though, if you're keeping it real, it's not a good look for the Dolphins, and that's why, if the Dolphins are gonna try and call his bluff and wait him out and force him to play or some stupid shit, dude, the longer they wait, the worse it gets for them. I'm telling you, this is not good for them. None of this is good for them. It's going to be bad for the progress of the team, the cohesion and chemistry. It's bad for PR. It's bad. It's just bad all around. It's absolute. They need to get something done, and they need to, as much as I hate to say it, they got to trade him and they got to send him somewhere. Again, unfortunately, which would make this whole situation even worse, I believe what they are waiting for is finalizing everything, that the details for the Deshaun Watson trade, because I think Xavier Howard either way, I think Xavier Howard's out of here, but I think that's how it's going to happen. It's going to be Xavier Howard and Tua and possibly some draft capital in a trade for Deshaun Watson. The NFL put out, that statement the other day. They expect Deshaun Watson to play the entire season. So, look, man, I think that's what's going to happen. I think that would be a shame, not just because Xavier Howard would be out of here, but then also because they would be giving up on Tua. And, then you can scratch off their first round pick from last year that's not here now. And a bust for the Dolphins. He might go on to have a good career, right? And I think that he likely will, but he'll be a bust for the Dolphins because he'll no longer be part of the team, right? So, anyway. So, with Xavier Howard, I'm not surprised. It actually totally makes sense, and I think that's going to be the case, right? So, it's funny though, the source that gave Reason this information had said that he's expected to come up with an ankle injury in the near future, and it's going to hold him out until the preseason. So, in other words, the preseason games. So, I don't know though. If he's going to do this whole injury thing, I would think he's likely going to sit out the preseason too, but we'll see. It could also be a situation where the preseason's still a couple of weeks or so away, and his ankle should be better than by then, so he's going to, I don't know, whatever. Just honestly, even though I actually agree with Howard, and I think he's, again, doing what's right by him, I just hate that this whole game has to be played to begin with. It's a dangerous game at that, and I think the Dolphins are fucking super stupid for engaging in it and having, gotten it to this point in the first place because of all of the dumb shit they have done that led up to this, right? So, starting with the shit contract. I told you guys back then that it was a shit contract. because of how they front loaded it with the way they did the guarantees and so on and so forth, among other things. Like, so, you know, like I said, anyway, and then, you know, the Byron Jones thing, etc., etc., etc. So, you know, the Dolphins suck, and they did this to themselves. So, you know, I agree with X100, but it's shitty that this game has to even be played. Like, it's a shit game. It's a super shit game. So fuck it. I hate it. I don't like it. Yeah. So with that being said, let me get to now the thing that I find to be, for me, at this point in training camp, the biggest focus, which also happens to be the biggest concern, right? So like I said, for me in training camp, I absorb all this information. I don't ignore it. I don't leave it out, but I absorb it all, and I just put it in a cache that I put on reserve until the preseason games come up, right? And then when I'm actually putting my eyes on the team, I recall these things from training camp, right? The play-by-play stuff, all the news and notes, and then I use that to help me do my evaluation of the team on the field, right? And so I use my eyes to validate or disprove the things that were said. And so that's why, you know, things like injuries are one of the things that I focus on the most, because I can't put my eyes on the team at practice, right? So because that's something that, you know, you can make a better evaluation of, because I don't need to see them, right? Like, I don't need to see the player to know the extent of their injury. They tell us that, right? Or whatever. So, or to use that in conjunction with, you know, certain players' track records and histories of it, right? So, all right, let me get into that, because there are several players now, including multiple wide receivers, including all at the top of the depth chart, who are injured. So obviously we know Preston Williams went on to injured reserve day 1 of training camp. Devontae Parker is also on PUP to start training camp, which is not good. Obviously, Landon Roberts is also on PUP. He's the other player that's on PUP. So one of our linebackers who is coming off that major knee injury, but also supposed to be somewhere at the top, or, you know, of the depth chart, expected to be one of the 53-man guys by most accounts, right? But, you know, now Will Fuller has an injury too. So that's great. And it, you know, it's supposedly minor, and okay, maybe he'll be back soon, and hopefully he is. The problem I have with it is that he also, along with a lot of these other guys, do have histories of it. So the problem I have is, if your history says that you sustain injuries and miss time, etc., and you start training camp either on PUP or injured in some way, well, at some point you have to break that cycle, right? You have to break that cycle. You have to prove you can stay healthy, stay on the field, and be available. Right now, a lot of people, you know, want to talk about how Tua's receiver core at the end of last season was almost completely depleted and shit. And while I will agree with that, I mean, I hope it doesn't happen, but with the way camp has started, there is some degree of chance that he might even start the season like that. Jakeem Grant also got hurt. So even some of the depth options are getting injuries, right? But all of these guys, right? So Preston Williams, Will Fuller, Devontae Parker, Jakeem Grant, all have injuries. That's not good. That is not a good thing. It's not good, not good, not good, not good. Because the only starter that you really have is Albert Wilson. And he's looking good out there. But he also does have an injury history. So who knows? Now, you know, he could be, you know, really fresh because he took the year off last year, and I think that could very well be the case. A lot of people are talking about that because he's really, you know, really putting on a show out there. But who's to say that he's going to stay healthy for the entire season when he actually starts taking hits, right? And even besides that, though, if all of your starters are injured, well, then you have to rely on all your backups. Then you're starting to rely on, I mean, look, if we were in the middle of the season right now and all these guys were out, if Preston Williams, Devontae Parker, Will Fuller, and Jakeem Grant weren't there, I mean, there is a possibility Jakeem Grant won't even make the team. But if all those guys aren't there, then you're looking at Malcolm Perry, Lynn Bowden, maybe Kirk Merritt, right? Who else, right? Like, that's what I'm saying. So that's my concern with it, right? Like, the start of the season's not that far off. Okay, middle of September, right? It's like a month and a couple weeks away. So, and our first preseason game is, so, man, it just, Waddle's out there too, of course. So I'm sorry, two of your starters, I'm sorry, I forgot Waddle. But Waddle also has some injury history, and while he's also out there looking good, yesterday in practice, he made a great catch, but then, was limping a little bit afterwards when he came down because he had to contort his body and do some crazy shit, right? Spectacular catch, but, when you have to do, sometimes you might tweak something or whatever. So, and they're absolutely using him on special teams and in returns. I think that is a giant mistake. And my biggest fear with him in particular is that they're going to get him injured because they use him on special teams. So, I hope, knock on wood or whatever, but like, man, that concerns me, right? So the injuries, and then DJ Fluker, right? DJ Fluker is now on injured reserve. He went on to PUP and then got placed on injured reserve, and he had surgery in his knee. Now they say that he's going to be back sometime like middle to late August or whatever. But I mean, Jesus Christ, dude. I mean, none of this offensive line is, settled or for sure or a guarantee or whatever, man. And you can't be losing guys, especially to injuries, man. Like, it's just not good. And then Larnell Coleman, one of the rookies, was placed on the COVID list. He was brought off the COVID list. They had signed, when DJ Fluker, when Coleman was on the list and Fluker went to IR, they had signed a guard, Ross Reynolds, I think his name was. And then a day or two later, Coleman comes off and he gets cut. Real quick, and I want to point that out too, because that's yet another example, just, example 100 gazillion billion trillion in the history of the NFL where, they'll just fucking pick up players and then discard them like they're nothing. This Ross Reynolds dude was here for like a day. I don't even know if he got to practice with the team. If he did, it wouldn't have fucking mattered because he just got cut after being signed like a day ago. Right? So, anybody that fucking wants to talk to, the business side of things with me, when they're defending the Dolphins, no. I mean, in the Xavier Howard situation, nah. Xavier Howard's 100% in the right. And he's been the upstanding guy in this. He's been the one trying to go for win-win scenarios and, situations so both sides win, and the Dolphins have flat out refused to even talk about it. And I get that, bro. I had a boss not too long ago, a couple jobs ago, pre-pandemic. I was a audio video tech, and I was doing really well because I bust my ass and shit. When I do a job and I put my name on it, I want to have pride in my work and I want to put out a good product and stuff. So I busted my ass, and I wasn't making much. I was making like $12 an hour, which in LA is garbage. Right? So I was trying to talk to my boss and be like, bro, listen, I want a raise, but I'm not going to just ask for more money. I'll also take on more responsibility and be play a bigger role. And it took me like 6 months to even just get to a chance to sit down with him, because every time I asked him to, take some time, he would just like brush me off. And it took me 6 months to finally get a few minutes to sit down and talk with him. And then when I did, he just brushed me off again and, you know, said no. And it just, so, you know, fuck business, bro. Fuck the way business is run, particularly in America, but across the entire world, is disgusting. Right? So, no, I'm sorry. I don't fucking, you know, no. Not what I will never, ever defend billionaires or millionaires or these giant corporations. No, they have all the wealth, all the resources, and they intentionally shit on the rest of us. So, they can eat my ass. All right, anyway, because I don't want to get into a political, like, you know, anti-capitalism rant here right now, but you get the point. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, that's really about it, though, for the past 2 days of training camp. Like I said, there wasn't really even much today. And, you know, like I said, when it comes to the, you know, play-by-play stuff, I know, like, you know, some of these other guys like to do it. Like, you know, Doug does his play-by-plays, and even Reason, you know, reads through the different articles that are written by the various media outlets around South Florida that give, you know, the highlights, the news and notes, and the, you know, so on and so forth. And he actually shows the video that they put out as well. Doug does the same thing. And I like, you know, personally, I look at that and I read those things and whatever I do. But, you know, in my videos, when I'm talking to you guys or to the handful of people that watch my show, I got to keep it real. I just don't really find it, especially because I know that you guys are getting it from other sources. It's just not really that, you know, I talk about a little bit and give some overviews, but I don't really find it necessary. And especially since I talk long enough as is, it would just make my videos even longer. But I don't find it necessary to go through the play-by-play myself. I know you guys are getting all of that, you know, whether it be from your own streams on Bleacher Report or whatever, you know, articles you read or whatever sources you get your news from. I know you guys watch Doug and TD and K-Flexin and Reason and all these other guys. So I know you get your play-by-plays. I'm not worried about that. If I felt you weren't getting it, then I would think it probably a little bit more important, because then you wouldn't be getting the full context. But I'm just super indifferent to that stuff, right? And it's just contextual data that gets locked away for when the preseason comes. So on that note, that's, you know, my focus is that. And so, you know, I'm hoping that all these guys that are injured are no longer injured when the preseason comes around. I mean, fucking DJ Fluker is going to still be on injured reserve likely when we play our first preseason game, but hopefully by the season, because that offensive, I mean, because that would almost assuredly mean then if Fluker's not ready to start the season, then that pretty much guarantees that Eichenberg is going to be the starting right tackle. And as technically sound as he may be, and as, you know, whatever, like, I have concerns for him being our right tackle, the blind side tackle, you know, in this upcoming season as a rookie. So, anyway, but my big focus is preseason. We're literally a couple weeks away. And so, man, you know, look, I'm excited to see how all this stuff plays out, even though I don't think it's going to end up being a good season, and there's going to be a lot of turnover and change within the organization this next off season. I mean, it's still Dolphins football, and I'm excited. And I got to keep it real, you know, the community, particularly around, you know, Reason's show, again, no disrespect to the other guys, but it's just more me. It's just more my style, right? Because he keeps everything in full context. You know, he has a more positive outlook on the season overall, but he still understands that, you know, and actively discusses and talks about the fact that, man, it could end up not being a good season. And there could be some major changes coming down the pipe if that's the case. So, you know, that doesn't mean that I'm not excited, and I'm actually even more excited for this season now that I found a place in a community where I actually feel like, you know, I kind of fit in there, which doesn't happen to me very often. So, yeah, anyway, so I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the preseason, that first preseason game. I think it's against Chicago, right? I think the first one is Chicago. Anyway, so that's a couple weeks away. And, you know, we'll keep giving you the updates through training camp. You know, I mean, going forward up until then, I'll do little discussions on the play-by-play stuff, right? And just kind of give you my personal views on those things. I mean, you know, like I said, for me, one of the biggest things is that Tua is healthy. You know, I like Albert Wilson. Glad he's out there healthy and showing out. I mean, the defense has had some good plays. You know, but I mean, like, the thing is too, is like, what do you make of that, right? Like, so, I mean, one of the things that, I know I said I was getting out of here. One of the things we talked about yesterday is Noah had some bad plays yesterday, right? He had some pass breakups, but then he also had some bad plays. So, you know, the conversation came up, well, if X is not here and then he goes out to the boundary, that secondary gets, you know, significantly weakened because you're not going to replace that. And then you have a rookie with Javon Holland back there now having to take on a lot more responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. Jalen Phillips is, you know, well, and if you lose all that production in the secondary, you either have to replace it in the secondary, or, which you're not going to be able to do, or you have to then increase your front seven in your pass rush, which, you know, then you have a rookie in Jalen Phillips there, you know, blah, 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 blah. So, you know, it is a relevant conversation, you know, and you do not want to be seeing, you know, Noah get beat, but it's just fucking practice. What do you actually make of it, right? So that's what I'm saying, right? Like, that's kind of my point when I say I don't care, because there's going to be plays, man, where in practice where he gets past his defense, right? Or maybe he gets an interception, and then there are going to be plays where he gets beat. What I want to see is in real games, live bullets. So the thing I care about, so again, just one more time, I'll reiterate, it's all contextual data that I store away, and I remember all these things. So then when the preseason comes up, for example, if Noah starts getting burned, well, then I'm going to be like, okay, those times in practice where he got burned and beat, that's actually more, you know, telling of what the actual situation is, because now in the preseason, he's getting burnt and beat and getting scored on. But on the flip side, if, you know, if he has good games and he's blanketing his receiver and gets past his defense and maybe even a fucking interception and starts to prove that maybe he does have ball skills, well, then then you say, okay, the good things he did in practice are more emblematic of how things are going, right? So we have to wait and see. So, you know, I'll do little commentary and then I'll give you updates on injuries and stuff like that. Oh, and yeah, it is Chicago. Saturday, August 14th. That's what I'm saying, man. We're like just over 2 weeks away from that. I mean, it's July 30th. We have one more day in this month, I believe, right? July 31st. One more day in this month, and then we have 2 weeks until our first preseason game. So it's going to come up lightning fast, and it is a concern to me that we have so many of these guys who are injured right now, particularly in our wide receiver room. Anyway, finally, on that note, I am going to get out of here, though. That is day 3 and 4 of training camp, day 2 and 3 of on-field work of training camp. So with that, I'm going to get out of here. I hope you guys appreciate my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. Of course, as always, follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Phins up.